Let's get sweaty.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the Shenmue Dojo Show interview special. So, we've got a good one for you today. So I am Skill Jim, and I'm joined as always by the original interview extraordinaire, Matthew Oliver. How you doing, Matt?
How you doing, James? Good, man. Yeah, long time since we've done one of these, but I'm really looking forward to this one.
Has been a long while, actually. So I'm glad we're getting a fine specimen to join us on the show today for a nice interview. I think it's going to be a really, really good one. So today we're actually joined by someone who had a front row seat during one of the most ambitious console launches in gaming history. As a PR representative for Sega of America during the Dreamcast era, he played a key role in shaping the public face of the console, from major launch campaigns to involvement in promotion for cult favourite games like Shenmue. With some interesting behind-the-scenes, first-hand stories from the front lines of this beloved but bittersweet period in Sega's history, we welcome Chase to the dojo. How's it going, Chase?
Hey, it's going just great. And just to add a little more clarity to my role, so I worked at Access Communications, which was the PR agency for Sega. So I was not in-house, I was their external agency, but we were in charge of doing all of the consumer PR around the Dreamcast and all the first-party games. I tell a lot of stories, so it makes it seem like Chase did all this stuff, but we had a large team. You know, there was at our agency, there was probably like 6 to 10 people working on the Dreamcast account. So it wasn't just, hey, look at all of Chase's great ideas. No, it was definitely a collective. But I personally did work on the launch and every first party game that Sega released, from its inception to when the console unfortunately was sunset. So, and we were also in charge of coming up with all of the promotional ideas, like swag, like what should we put out for this game, you know? And then we've created a lot of creative swag over the years, which is usually when we do it for PR, it's done strictly for media, for reporters. So we might do quantities as low as 10 to 500, usually not more than that. So a lot of things we did for PR is we either sent to media or we had copies for ourselves, but the general public never saw any of these items. And this was pre-internet, so it's not like you'd send somebody a piece of cool swag and then they would put on TikTok or put on their, or post photos of it. I mean, the internet was very nascent, so I mean, yeah, there were some Dreamcast blogs early on, but a lot of the stuff I did, when I shared it or given it to people, like they've said, oh, I've never seen any of this stuff. So.
Right. How long actually were you at Sega for them, for like the whole period of time? Would you
say?
So
I started at the PR agency in '99 to launch the Dreamcast, and so I worked on every title all the way through its like the whole campaign. So probably past the end of the Dreamcast, so maybe I don't know what year did you guys are probably bigger experts now without me checking my notes. What year did the Dreamcast sunset now?
2001 it was announced.
Oh wow,
it was probably went on a little bit, like 2003 maybe.
Yeah, so I was probably working on the Sega account probably throughout 2006. The agency I worked at actually had Saturn before Dreamcast, so I was able to get a bunch of that old swag too.
Oh, awesome! I didn't realize you were there during the Saturn a little bit as well.
Yeah, no, I wasn't, but the agency I worked at, they had all their leftover closets of leftover Saturn stuff. Because before I started at Access, I was a freelance game reviewer for many years. So that's sort of how I made the segue from journalist to publicist, was because I was being flown around and meeting with a lot of other reporters. I was also writing for a lot of publications which they wanted to get the Dreamcast in ultimately. So, because I wrote for a lot of music and alternative culture publications, which is a which was a market they wanted to reach. So I was brought on board first to sort of get exposure for the Dreamcast in large circulation but alternative press. So like it might be like a techno magazine or some other magazines that it might have, 40,000 to 100,000 distribution, but not necessarily something you see when you go to the supermarket magazine rack. So that was my original role, was to sort of expand it to the markets, to the publications that I was fluent in. But then I basically I became a generalist working with everything, all types of press. So I was there, and then all the way through, I was 13 years at the PRNG from 99 to 2013.
Wow. So does that mean you've worked on, like, say, the original Xbox a little bit for Sega and like PS2?
Well,
GameCube?
not Xbox for Sega or GameCube. I launched the PlayStation Vita. I worked PlayStation 3. I launched I should have said, after the Sega account, when I then moved over to the PlayStation account, and so
Okay.
I also worked on 2K, Disney Interactive. So I worked on a lot. I launched BioShock 2, Bayonetta, Disney Epic Mickey, the PlayStation Vita, as I mentioned. And then my final two clients were Twitch, which I launched, and PlayStation. And then I went in-house at Twitch, and I was their PR person I did all of Twitch's PR from 2011 to 2019. And now I'm over at a company called Stream Elements, which basically provides free broadcast engagement monetization tools for streamers. So I still work with the Twitch ecosystem.
Nice. And we use Stream Elements for some of our stuff. Actually, we use it for our emotes and stuff live. When someone subscribes, all that pops up. We use Stream Elements for it. So there we are.
We do those pop-ups. Yep, that's one of the things we have, all those types of tools.
Brilliant. Okay, sort of, I guess, a follow-up question to it. Obviously, thinking back to the Dreamcast launch, it's off the back of the Sega Saturn, and which we know in America was challenging. It essentially, I don't want to use the word bombed, but it didn't do particularly well. How do you go about coming off of a console that essentially failed commercially and go about rebuilding the Sega brand, the Dreamcast brand, and sort of get people excited again around Sega, given what happened with the Saturn?
Well, telling my own backstory is, before I went in-house to do PR for the launch of the Dreamcast, I was at E3 in 1999, but this was before their debut, which would be in 2000 at E3. That's the E3 convention, is the big American games convention for your listeners, which unfortunately post-pandemic ended up folding. And that's another story into itself, but for decades it was since like 97 through about 3 years ago, it was the biggest in America, the biggest game convention. And so when I went to E3 in 99 before the launch, I, as a journalist, went and saw the console. And actually I saw, even though it wasn't a first-party game, I saw Code Veronica on the Dreamcast. And I said, wow, if this is the next generation of game consoles, I wanted to be a part of it. And that's what made me even want to work on it, was Code Veronica, seeing how great it looked. And I think that's the thing, is when other reporters were at E3 seeing the demo, the console before it launched, they could see how great it was. And even like when we later days took it on tour, well, actually, I'll work up to that. So how do you build? I should clarify for all your listeners as well that I do public relations. So my job is to work with the media to get them to write reviews about it. I don't do advertising or any other. And there wasn't like a social media manager because Twitter didn't exist or any of that. Yeah. So it was like, how do we get reviews of this product or features of this product in publications big and small and obscure? And so when we started, so the big part of that then is the media. So is that we did like media tours with the console where we would show Dead or Alive 3. I think it was Dead or Alive 3 or just Dead or Alive.
Dead or Alive 2 on the Dreamcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I apologize in advance that I did not go back and research all my notes from 1999 to remember exactly what everything was by date. But yeah, so we took Dead or Alive 2 on the road, and we would show it side by side with the same version for like the PlayStation, and it actually looked better on the Dreamcast. Right. And so that was sort of our proof of concept like when we started doing media tours to say, look how great it looks. But the other thing is, this is one of the most important things about console launches. As I also learned much later on, like with the PlayStation Vita, is there's two main components. Well, three: price point. But the two main things is having an excellent console and then having excellent games to play on it. And as I learned with the Vita, I mean, my favorite games were Sound Shapes and Gravity Rush, which were still, those aren't AAA titles. They weren't like Uncharted or the big name PlayStation brands. And the Vita suffered because there was no killer app that people said, I got to own a Vita because I got to play this game on it.
Yeah, true.
You know, but what the Vita had in common with the Dreamcast was that everybody who had one loved the console. Or, you know, so Vita owners love their Vita. They just wish there was better games. With Dreamcast, every Dreamcast owner loves it, and they don't understand what happened to it, why it wasn't more successful. Because in addition to loving the console, they love the games. I mean, everything, you know, Sonic Adventure, Crazy Taxi, you know, Jet Ryan Radio. It had such cool, innovative content, which, frankly, I think would have done so much better. All these odd games would have done so great, like in the era of the PlayStation Network, because they were not AAA titles, but they were the kind of quirky things that people loved. And so, because we would see this, like I would get, let's say Entertainment Weekly, which was like one of the biggest weekly publications in America, they would review games like Seaman. So we'd get all these great reviews for these weird, funky Dreamcast titles, but they never translated into sales. Which, unfortunately, I think Sega, after the Dreamcast era, they started to try to do more conventional titles, but those didn't do well either. So it's kind of a tough thing, because to be known for really cool, innovative titles, but if they don't sell, it's kind of that's the big challenge. I mean, the game industry faces that today. You know, it's like that's why we get so many of these big multiplayer, generic types of games. I mean, I'm saying the games within themselves have different characteristics, but it's the genre. It's like the genres that have mass appeal. We keep seeing more of, and you see less of the really innovative stuff happening, except on the indie level.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Like Sega always felt like the company would like really taking a lot of risks throughout the era.
And then the other thing we did back then was we did what were media tours. So we would take these new properties, these new titles, and we'd go to DC, New York, and we were based in San Francisco. So we were in all the main, like the IGN and GameSpots, all the main game pubs were based in Bay Area. But then in LA and DC and New York, you had like the newspapers, like DC, USA Today, and New York Times in New York, obviously, Entertainment Weekly. You had a lot of the big business type pubs there, and then LA had its pubs as well. And so we take these games on the road. We do road shows. We'd go to these different cities usually it would be like me or one of our other staff, just a tester, and we would show them the game, walk them through it. Like the PR person would do all the talking and talk about the features. The tester would be there to actually play through on their behalf, so I didn't have to do the demo. I just speak to it. And the game testers are pretty much an underappreciated, underrated part of the games industry, especially at that time, I would say, is because testers, for people who don't know, are people who before it launches, they play the game over and over again to find bugs, and they archive all that, and then the devs, once they have a list of like, here's the 200 bugs, they go, okay, well, we have time to fix 10 of them. And so, which is also true, is that just because they find them doesn't mean everything can be fixed in time. But they know the games inside and out, so it was always great to go on the road with the testers because they really could speak to the games really well. Like I said, being a tester was like an entry-level job to a certain extent, and I always felt like they were underappreciated for what they could bring to the table in terms of being spokespeople. I mean, not all of them are trained spokespeople, not all of them were eloquent in how they speak, but the ones who I went on the road were always really good at it. So
at school, that was always like the dream job on the playground, was like being a game tester. That was like something that we always imagined being, just getting paid to play games.
but that was the thing I also learned later on, which is that game testers, it's not like you're playing through the full game. You might be playing the same level over and over again, and then once you found all these mistakes and that they don't get fixed, so it's can be a very thankless job based on what I heard before. I don't know how things have changed, so I'm not a spokesperson for the game testing industry, but from a couple that I've spoken to, I remember that was a frustration that, they would, one, it's a really repetitive job, and two, you don't always get everything that you uncover that's wrong doesn't always get fixed, so it's also kind of frustrating on that level. I think the whole idea, though, the bigger the issue, those are the things that the devs would obviously focus on, but there might be a lot of smaller things that just add up. And so the other part, and this might be more interesting, is that we also did a lot of launch. Well, first off, we also had I'll build up to E3, but we also did a lot of launch events for each title. For Space Channel 5, we wanted to make Ooh La La like a celebrity. So we went to Universal City Walk at my Universal Studios in California, and we had like a live action model came out, and we did like her introduction, like this was like her introduction to Hollywood. So we had like a red carpet, and we had like a look-alike contest, and we had all these people with colored wigs and stuff there, and and they did a performance on the stage. We had local broadcast crews come to film it. We also, for Crazy Taxi, we had I don't know, did the Dreamcast Championships, was that strictly US or did it make it to Europe as well?
I think it was US.
Yeah. I would imagine it would be US because they were our mobile assault vehicles. So they had these big, huge trucks with kiosks inside that would go around the US to concerts and other places where there were a lot of kids at.
I remember them, yeah. I'll remember seeing them.
Yeah, and so out of it, they made 2 Dreamcast Championships. The one was with Sonic, but the other was with Crazy Taxi. And so then the winners, we brought them all to San Francisco, and we had the Dreamcast. We had a competition with about the top 10 players who at each tour stop, whoever they had like a leaderboard. So they brought the top 10 best Crazy Taxi players together to compete. And so that was kind of cool. We had MXPX, the punk band, perform, make it more of a cool event. And they had everybody was competing at little kiosks that had giant cutouts of taxis. So it had a very visual aesthetic taxi look. And it also ended up having a very good narrative in terms of the people who competed, because it came down to the top 2 were this woman, Lindsay, who was amazing and really, and then she was against, I forgot the guy's name. He got to the finals at that event through finding a glitch in the game, so he knew how to take advantage of the glitch to progress, and there wasn't any rules against it, because it's like one of those things where you don't realize something can happen until it does, and you don't, it's your, they can, it's Sega's game, so it's like just because they found a hack or a glitch, it's not on the player. So he was sort of like the bad boy, the villain, I guess, if you will, if this were on TV, the guy who found a way to sort of cheat into the company, whereas she was the good girl. And also at that time, you didn't see a lot of women being in gaming, even though we knew they were there, but they just, even today, I think they're underrepresented in the game industry. As somebody who has 2 daughters who are really big into gaming, no influence of my own, they would have all their other girlfriends over and they would just game. And I'm like, whenever I'd see these stories about girls don't game, I'm like, do you know any girls? Because they game just as much as any guys,
Yeah.
I think there's probably more public spaces where they get, a lot more bullying and abuse that they might not be as visual on multiplayer games, but I digress. So anyway, we had the hero versus the villain, and she ended up winning. So it was a really great moment,
That's awesome.
for her to pull it off. And I call him the villain. I don't know the guy. I don't even, he might be but if we were trying to tell the story, it's sort of like the person you were hoping would win did.
Yeah, the underdog kind of thing. Yeah.
And so we did events like that for Seaman. We rented out. There was Aquarium by the Bay in San Francisco. So we brought like the developer, and we had probably kiosks set up there for people to play the game, but we showcased it at an aquarium, so that way, the aesthetics of everything would tie in with that. Jet Grind Radio, we did our whole Graffiti is Art event.
That's cool.
Which is also in the Bay Area. And that's where we had a bunch of people submit their graffiti, and then we brought the top 5 together to do a graffiti challenge on big tapestries at a big public space here, just in Irving Plaza. But a couple things. One, we didn't want people actually doing tagging, sending in actual graffiti off walls, because then we'd be encouraging illegal activity. Like, hey, go tag up your local subway and then send us photo. So it was almost, I think we had to have them like send drawings of what their work, like do it on paper type thing. Mm-hmm. So the problem is, I think out of the 5 people we brought out there, 4 of them were awesome, but one guy was awful. Like, I was kind of embarrassed. Like, they're all set up like on these big, huge tapestries doing their work in front of audiences, people watching, and I'm like, I was embarrassed. Like, wait, this guy's going to be one of our representation of some of the best graffiti artists we could find for this. So, anyways, but the big issue with the event was that we happened to schedule it on the same day was Clean Up the City Day in San Francisco, and but here's the thing: the city approved our event, so it's not on us. So basically, somebody in City Hall would have probably got like, "Why did you approve this graffiti event, art event?" And so, but we ended up giving some money to the city, as like, hey, But the whole message we're trying to impart is not that graffiti should be legal, but the art form of graffiti. That graffiti is a form of art, because if you put it on a legal, canvas and look at it, you can go. We're not talking about somebody scribbling their name. We're talking about the actual, when people create art with it. It's beautiful, and I think that's what we were trying to celebrate. That there is a skill and artistry to graffiti when it's performed in that way, and so that's what we were celebrating. But ultimately, what we're trying to celebrate is the launch of a video game.
Yeah.
And to me, Jet Grind Radio is one of my top 5 favorite games of all time for its just overall aesthetics, the music, the cell shading look of the game, everything about it.
Amazing.
And so,
one of my favorites.
For Phantasy Star Online, what we did for that is that we had Dolby. The sound for the game was done by Dolby Studios. So we had a Dolby studio up in San Francisco, but there's also one in LA. So we had, because the whole point of Phantasy Star Online is like one of the first online console games, we had reporters in LA, reporters in San Francisco, and then we got Sonic Team in Japan to all play together. So this way, the media are actually, well, one, they're playing the game, but they're also seeing how smooth it works and how, with this whole online multiplayer experience. So that helped really sell that in. So these are the types of events that are getting the media behind the games to talk about them, which is, that's to get back to your initial questions, like how do we launch a console? Well, you start with, with the console we launched at E3. We launched it at $99.99. So that night, which is in September, and E3 is in June, following June. So the actual launch event back then, it wasn't unusual for consoles or to do midnight launch events. So we did hours around the country, and we had some celebrities at hours. We had Vern Troyer, who was Mini-Me, from the Austin Power movies, and we had I forget her name, actress from Baywatch. They were at our event. And yeah, so we had all the people. But that's, in those days, even if it were, say, a mediocre console, people still always come. People were excited about it before they knew what they were getting.
Yeah.
So in those days,
any console launch, everyone's always excited, aren't they?
Yeah, it's like today, it's the equivalent like these smartphone things where people line up to get a new Apple, not knowing
exactly,
not knowing until they get it what's right or wrong with it. It's like everybody wants to be an early adopter when it comes to console launches. So yeah, so everybody lined up for that, and we had like the biggest launch in entertainment history at the time, and we put out a bunch of press releases announcing the amount of sales and so forth. And we gave away we gave away the very first Dreamcast. We had Peter Moore, the CEO of SEGA at the time, gave out the first Dreamcast at our event to the first person in line, and we got pictures of him holding it up and all that. So yeah, so that was the launch event. But then the next really big showcase for us was E3 in 2000. We had a big, huge booth. Every other hour, we'd have Space Channel 5 come on stage with Ooh La La performing one of the songs. And it was kind of like it would vacuum up everybody. E3 is like this big, huge convention with people spread out everywhere. But whenever this came on, first off, the volume was real loud. But at that time, guys just wanted to see a pretty girl dancing too. So it would be like a vacuum. So whenever those performances came on, everybody at E3 suddenly ended up in our booth. Then in between, we had inline skaters for Jekyll Radio. And I think we had graffiti artists up on a higher area of the booth. We also had like a very tiny area for crews to go up where they could film our booth from up high, but also film the whole convention. So that was sort of like that way anybody doing E3 coverage by default, they'd have to cover us if they wanted to also get access to the best spot vantage point in the convention, because it wasn't really normal. But that was the age where game companies, not just Sega, but every game company was throwing around so much money to make big spectacles at E3. It felt like Vegas back then. It was loud, it was colorful, there was, a lot of people, a lot of, actors and people, cosplayers, all that stuff. So it was a pretty wild time.
Just to slip in a quick Shenmue question about E3, were you involved in that was the E3 with the motorbike, right? And the forklift and the crates?
I don't remember the
Was that 2001?
TGS. It might have been
was that TGS, was it?
Oh, okay, then I wasn't at Tokyo Game Show, so yeah, I didn't take part in that. So, okay, interview's over. I've got no more to add. But I think the first big thing, and this, is that the first big thing I was doing was we're going to bring Yu Suzuki over to the U.S. to speak at the Game Developers Conference, and so this was the Game Developers Conference in 2000, and so the whole idea was. Because he was like an icon in pioneering game development, but he'd been around for a while, we wanted to have Greg Thomas, who was sort of head of Sega Sports, which would become 2K Sports. We wanted to have him because he was sort of like the rising star in the video game sports area, because all the Sega Sports games were really well reviewed and revered. So we thought, why don't we have the new guy interview the veteran, and so that was the presentation we were putting on at the Game Developers Conference. My role was to work on the speech that they were presenting, because they were going to do a Q&A. So it started with me emailing Japan saying, okay, here are like 5 questions, and then they would respond to just one of them with just a yes or no when it wasn't a yes or no question. I'm like going, okay, this is going to take longer than we thought. And so then my boss said, you need to go over there. So I'm like, fine, I'll go to Japan. So I went to Japan and I met with Yu Suzuki and his team. And that's when we started. That's when I also grabbed a whole bunch of cool Sega swag that I couldn't get in America from the Japanese captains. Like, oh, can I have that watch? Can I have that? And because nice. I've always been a fanboy of the things I'm passionate about. And so, I also got my autographed Shenmue.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
And so I met with him, and I found out, like, they ended up creating a whole Q&A. Here's what he wants to ask, and here's his response. And so I'm like, okay, but then I started working with Greg Thomas, and, when you're a creative director who's a popular creative director in his role, you don't want to be told what to ask when you're talking with one of your idols or one of these things. So he's like, no, I've got my own questions to ask. So I'm like, okay, this puts me in a pickle. So I had to Frankenstein everything together. I thought, since Greg's questions matched the answers Yu Suzuki wanted to give, I figured, hey, if I put them all together, everybody's happy. You can say what you want, you can say what you want. And I felt I am a genius, patting myself on the back. Victory lap, I solved this unsolvable problem. So then that brings us to the presentation at GDC. And here's like the copy, the game development.
Oh, wow.
Very nice.
This is what we created.
Nice artwork is showing there.
Yeah, so here's it's a little bit more exciting than the conference program cover.
Take
Oh,
your
yeah.
place in game history.
And I can
Nice.
send you this, but this right here is a description of the panel. The role of reality in epic game creation. And so we also had the creative director from Space Channel 5 presenting it at GDC as well. And so then we created the flyer that I sent out. I'm mailing a copy to one of you.
So cool.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And so on the back, it's got ooh la la, because like I said, it was for both. And basically just says, please join Sega of America for breakfast to honor and welcome world-renowned game developers Yu Suzuki and Tetsuya Mizuguchi to the Game Developers Conference. And so it was like a breakfast we organized with them. So anyway, so then the event comes, and then they both meet on stage. Yu Suzuki meets Greg Thomas, and I'm there in the back of the room, smiling at myself for all my genius. And then this was the first big event I ever worked on, by the way. I'd done a lot of like product mailings and pitching, but I haven't worked on like an actual live presentation before in PR. So this is like my first big baby. And then my boss comes running over me, like screaming at me, like, "What the hell happened?" They're reading script. Everybody's confused up there and just going off on me, like, and I'm like, "Oh crap!" And so I guess it didn't really. What I was trying to do didn't. It got lost in translation, I guess, to what I was trying to achieve. Like, I think probably Yu Suzuki's team probably looked at it and said, "These aren't my questions," and I don't think they understood my genius. And so then then I was told, like, oh, they had to spend the next 2 hours, Greg and Yu Suzuki, working together to fix everything. So I was like, man, that was harsh on me. I was being screamed at like that. And so that was my Yu Suzuki experience. We also did the presentation itself went off really well. So we created a video there. You can find it online, it's a video within a video online. They show the intro and then they play a video. The video that they play is one that I produced. I mean, I went into the studio with create a script, and I just remember the music that plays through it, this drum beat. I just sampled it from Gus Gus. It's called.
I think I know which video you're talking about. Actually,
yeah.
Was it included on like a demo disc as well?
No, it wasn't. It was only played live at GDC, but it was a video that I sent you one of you a link earlier today.
Yeah, we'll play it in the.
Yeah. When you hear the beat, that's just the drum loop from the opening of the song from a Icelandic group called Gus Gus. The song's called "Believe," amazing song, but the hook is so contagious. But later on, I found that they sampled that loop from somebody else. But anyways, but that was my inspiration. So I said, whenever I hear this groove, it always gets me into the song. So I said, well, I'll just use it under the bed of this video.
In the history of video game development, there is no debating the contributions Yu Suzuki has made. Born in 1958 with a background in electronic science and a love of wine and his family, Yu Suzuki has always had a passion for being a pioneer. Ever since he joined Sega Enterprises in 1983, he has continually pushed the boundaries of all available technology with his arcade-oriented creations. In 1985, he created Hang On, the first simulation game in the world. Instead of controlling your motorcycle with a joystick, Yu Suzuki replicated an actual cycle for the gamer to sit on. In the same year, he unleashed Space Harrier, a shooting game with an alluring 3D-like effect. When 1986 hit, he pushed lifelike graphics to the limit with the driving simulator Outrun. Followed a year later by the aerial odyssey Afterburner. Afterburner, with its amazing sense of speed, was introduced with a cabinet that rotated on 2 axes, making players feel the motions of flight. Taking the driving game to a new level, Yu Suzuki unveiled Power Drift in 1989. Packed with roller coaster curves, gamers rejoiced when they got behind the wheel of this multi-linked driving simulator. Of course, few will disagree that when R360 surfaced in 1990, it broke new ground. This game was played within a giant roll cage, marking it as the first game ever to be able to rotate 360 degrees in all directions. Continuing to make history, he was the first to use the 3D CG Model 1 board to make virtual racing practically virtual reality at the time. A year later, in 1993, Yu Suzuki introduced Virtua Fighter, the first 3D CG fighting game in the world, which was also the first game to ever be put on permanent display at the Smithsonian Institution. From 1994 to 1997, 3 more installments followed, each advancing the fighting genre to new levels of realism. In 1999, F355 Challenge hit the arcades, equipped with a 6-speed gear shift and a clutch pedal, removing any doubt that Yu Suzuki was a master of game development. Yu Suzuki redefined the arcade experience, but now he has created Shenmue for the SEGA Dreamcast. As his first console game, there is no question that Shenmue is his most ambitious masterpiece ever. This cinematic epic is packed with realism, from the multitude of motion-captured characters to the texture mapping of the smallest items. With weather and time elements constantly shifting, and characters with immense depth, Yu Suzuki has effectively created a world that reflects the one we live in. As technology evolves, there's no question that Yu Suzuki will be evolving with it.
So yeah, so we played the video, and then so that's sort of how we one of our big introductions to Shenmue. But part of that was to illustrate, and part of our pitching was to the angle we took with Shenmue was that we wanted to show how this video game is more aligned with movies than with games. Like, that's always been this long-standing goal with games, games that are striving to be real, which is always about, every year it's like, how can we make games more realistic? And the whole idea is to eventually blur the line where, sometimes when you watch some of these video games, like I'm watching The Last of Us, the TV show, and it looks just like, the game looks just like the show. Sometimes you could probably show clips from a game and have people think, oh, is that real? So I think we're getting closer and closer to that crossover, but at the time, Shenmue raised the bar for realism. And so I was going to just read through some of these points about the game, about how we were trying to make that comparison, if you would like me to.
Yeah, please do.
Go for it.
So, so from producer to director, the making of Shenmue, Yu Suzuki's transformation of the gaming medium to a cinematic masterpiece. I'm reading off a deck we put together on it. So the production begins. It took 5 years to make the journey from concept to the screen. It had a blockbuster-sized budget and more crew members than those aboard the Titanic. And so, obviously, at some point, we researched how many people were on the Titanic and how many people were on the
nice touch.
Yeah, crew.
I like it.
But I don't know. Do you really want to compare your crew size to a ship that went down? Anyways, it's just me thinking in retrospect.
Yeah.
Next slide. A script is written, a unique and epic tale of cinematic proportions from the plot to the time spent playing. Next script. Casting call, 250 3D characters, each with different schedules depending on the time of day. Unprecedented amounts of dialogue and professional voiceover talent. So that was actually really cool, this whole idea of characters with different schedules. Then next slide. The perfect leading man. Rio, how's it pronounced?
Rio.
Is constantly evolving as he explores the surroundings and interacts with other virtual actors. Cinematic standards of development. For true immersion in the Shenmue world, all images must look and react in a true-to-life fashion. This means reflecting mirrors, accurate shadow casting, candles that melt as time passes, birds that fly away when frightened, a kitten that can't be raised. A set design not made from cardboard. Over 100,000 designs of people, scenery, backgrounds, and props. Over 30 buildings that can be entered and inspected from arcades to antique stores. Various modes of transportation are available, including a forklift, a motorcycle, or riding a bus. Next slide. An architectural achievement. Manabu Takamoto gave his advice on rooms' interiors. I put career highlights with a question mark, so I guess I was supposed to fill something in there of Takamoto's career highlights. But apparently, he must be somebody who's big in the architectural scene.
He is, yeah. He actually came on board for Shenmue 3 as well.
Right. So he gave his advice on the rooms and interiors. The importance of props. Vast amount of operational items, light switches, phones, arcades with playable video games, refrigerators, cassette players, vending machines with Sega toys, flashlights, and a jukebox. The heart inside the machine, new chip and semiconductor, 10 times faster than the previous model, creates delicate movements, hair swaying, lips moving in sync with voices, light reflections in eyes. Perfecting the stunts, motion capturing, movements of all main characters. Tetsuya Hattori, expert practitioner of the martial art form known as Aikyo-Kuken. I apologize to any Japanese listeners. Action, the modes and art of combat. 3D fighting engine, quick timer events, advanced AI allows Ryo to pick up skills from other inhabitants. Ooh, AI, now it's topical.
Yeah, true.
From paper to the big screen, texture mapping, realistic items, Coke cans, etc. Filming during the right season. Magic weather. The weather changes according to the time of year. Weather data was compiled from Yokosuka City. Perfect timing. The clock is constantly ticking as each day gradually goes from morning to night. Stores close up shop at night. Townspeople often go home to sleep as the sun rises. Setting the sound stage. ADPCM, a new technology for enhancing sound. Sound keys increase from 34 to 64, allowing up to 64 simultaneous voices to be heard. Proximity effects that alter the sound and volume according to the direction of the character faces. I always thought that was really cool. The soundtrack. A full orchestra constructed the theme song in order to capture the epic nature of Shenmue. Okay, this is interesting. Shenmue heads to American theaters. Much
Shenmue the movie.
Much anticipated game already being cited as the closest thing to cinema.
Maybe not.
Designing for a different market, dubbing versus subtitles. No, I don't think there was a movie. I mean, I think
maybe there was a movie that was like shown in theaters in Japan, and it just sort of compiled the cutscene. So I don't think that's what that means, though. Actually,
and that came out with Xbox as well, didn't it? With Shenmue 2 on Xbox, they released a DVD of the first game, like compiled cutscenes. I don't know if that's what they're
just
referring
sounds
to.
This slide might have been just the idea of comparing it to like
cinema.
Because the first bullet is much anticipated game already being cited as the closest thing to cinema.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, actually. It's nice that they sort of like zoned in on all of the features that make Shenmue so special and unique, though.
Yeah.
So it really truly lists to the general public there like what's so special about this game.
And that deck was what I then condensed into like a pitch to reporters. Like I remember I had a pitch where I just said, here's why Shenmue is like modern day movies, and then I had like all those bullets typed in an email, and that's how we were sort of positioning with the media, which is that we've achieved the level that everybody's been striving for with their games, and it's amazing how far we've come since then, and we'll probably keep going even further. And then the other thing we did, which you guys are obviously aware of because you have them now, is we created those trading cards for the game. That was something we probably created like about 100
actually.
Or something. Yeah. So yeah, we've got those cards. Yeah, so those are something we just did for press. You're not going to find them in the stores, and people didn't post them anywhere. And I'm sure those must be the only 4 we did, because usually everything I created, I always kept at least one master copy for myself, and those are the only 4 I have. So if there's any other characters,
So you got one of Nozomi, you got one of Chai, one of Landi, one of Rio. They're actually really nice. Yeah.
And then the other thing we have is I still have a big stack of Chai cards. I don't know how I ended up with it. We must have over-ordered on the Chai. The other thing we did was we had a big event at E3 where we had all the game developers at our booth for like doing meet and greets like after hours at the end of the day, and each one had their own personal trading card. So like I
Yes.
have a Yu Suzuki card for that, and each other game studio had. So
You had all sorts there, didn't you? You had Nagoshi there, who obviously went on to Yakuza. He was one of them on the trading cards that I saw. I was watching your Game Realms interview the other day, and I saw you popped them all up. I can't remember who else was there, but a lot of the big Sega developers
Yuji
were there at
Naka
the
maybe,
time.
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yuji
yeah.
Naka was on
I
there.
can take a picture of I have them all in the sleeve in my photo album. I can take a picture for you, so you can look at all the celebs.
That'd be brilliant.
Yeah. So just talking about merchandise while we're on the subject, then. So how did these things just happen? Because obviously you've spoken previously about like the Seaman Tin, where it like makes noises. You open it, makes a sound.
Oh yeah.
How do you like find the manufacturers for that sort of press item?
Yeah, so for what he's referring to is we had a giant tin Seaman can, and it had an audio thing on the inside. So when you open it up, the first thing you hear is Seaman's voice saying,
"Man, you can't send me back if that's what you're thinking."
It's really cool, actually. Yeah.
something along
Is
those
that
lines.
Lenin Nimoy as well, or something, right? The Star Trek guy, I'm sure it is.
Oh yeah, so yeah, he was. I remember.
Didn't he voice it?
Yeah, I forgot. I know he had some role in the game. I don't know if he was Seaman or if he was the narrator
I think
on
he
the
was
documentary.
Um,
Was he?
I think he might be the voice of the fish. You know, once
Yeah.
because you train the fish, don't you, to speak through the
Yeah.
microphone.
Yeah.
And, like it grows to a certain size, and I think it does start talking.
Well, if one of you are on Wikipedia during this interview, I'm sure we can get to the bottom of this mystery. I do remember he had we never worked with him. Like, I don't remember pitching out interviews with. I think it was something that maybe even at the time we might have. I have to go check my notes. I mean, might have been something that we didn't make public. You know, not every celebrity wants to be public. Sometimes things are done, where they, for whatever reason, they're not public about it. But I don't really remember pitching out Leonard Nimoy. So I remember his association with the game, but I don't remember being able to pitch him out. So, or it might have been like we were able to mention it, but he wasn't doing interviews for us. And, but to get to your question, so like the 10 we did, that was for the Seaman event. And I mean, different things are different. Like different things get sourced differently. Like I don't remember. I think they might have done that in house at Sega, sourced those tins out. But there's things that I personally did, like when we did Skies of Arcadia. I'm the one who got these wooden swords, like these wooden swords that I then had wood burnt with the name Skies of Arcadia on it. Like I tracked those down. What are other things that I've done?
Did you do any other Shenmue stuff? Because I've got. I'm sure that was E3 2000 as well. Actually, that. Does that look familiar?
Yeah, things like that. No, we didn't do that. I did the cards, the trading cards. That probably
right.
Was
the phone card for Shenmue 2.
Yeah, not that. I didn't.
Okay.
The ones with the 4 cards that I think I was involved in those because I have a whole bunch left over. So that's how I also remember. What did I work on?
These things, is that anything
to
do with you?
Those were all. Those are the press kit folders. No, those were all done in house at Sega.
Right. Okay.
So because don't forget they're in house create things for general marketing, whereas we then decided what to do with specific press. For example, when I did Quake Arena, the Quake game for Dreamcast? I did these thermoses that were branded Quake that looked like a giant bullet. And so,
brilliant.
But here's the thing, though. My approach to promotional items at the time was don't think of like a lot of times when people are doing promotional items, they might think, oh, it's a helicopter game, so let's do hats with a little helicopter on the top or something like with a thing or something like they might think of stupid ideas that relate to the genre of game, but I actually reverse engineer swag by thinking, what's something that I want? And how can I tie this into the game? And I said, I need a good thermos. I said, well, this thermos looks just like a bullet. Let's put Quake on it. If I need one, there's probably somebody else out there who needs a good thermos. And lo and behold, that's how we ended up with Quake thermoses for it. I also thought it would be fun to recontextualize the game because it had in a humorous way. So the promotional card for it, because when you think of Quake, you think of just all out violence and gore and shooting. And so the card I created for it, that went with the thermos was like this whole flower power. Like it was like this very hippie, like totally pacifist type of tongue-in-cheek humor.
Yeah, like the complete opposite.
Right. So, because anybody's getting a quick game would be able to see the humor there, so it wouldn't be misconstrued. But yeah. So, but that's also just my thinking in general. Like I always approach any project I'm working on. I think, how can I go against the grain of what's always been done? I mean, before doing PR, I ran a record label for 9 years, and I used to like put out a lot of gothic and industrial music. But I would go to I was in San Diego, so I'd go to Comic Cons and find local artists, and I'd find a way to take art that you wouldn't necessarily associate with the genre and integrate it into my album covers. But in a dark way. So it would still tied in with the genre, but in a way that people like, okay, why am I listening to this really dark, gothic, gloomy CD, but the character who might be caught in a web looks like Mickey Mouse or something like that. So I tried to bring in a different type of imagery than I was used to seeing, which was always like graveyards and people in hoods and stuff like that. But anyways, so I've always applied that to everything I do, in PR. Is I don't want to follow what ways things are always been done. I want people to have a different experience with it. But a lot of the initial games, when we launched the Dreamcast, came with like Sonic Adventure and a number of other games with it. We didn't do individual tchotchkes or everything for those games because they were sent out with the platform. So it wasn't like we needed to do a secondary thing. We did create, actually, no, that was for Sonic. I said we did do some Sonic shirts, but those were for a different Sonic game.
Right.
So yeah, so we didn't bother like creating events or separate tchotchkes or things for games that were part of the launch package. But I do remember we did a event in New York for we do showcases though. We'd go to New York and set up a room full of kiosks, not just the individual games, but I remember we did one for Dreamcast where we had like Samba de Amigo and a bunch of other games. Basically, this is when you had games that were not going to be big revenue drivers, but so you'd bundle a bunch together at the same event. Like you didn't have the budget to take one of these games on the road on its own. But the great thing about Samba de Amigo is one of the few games where you can take the most disgruntled, angry person. Once you put the maracas in their hand, people cannot stop smiling. It's the one game that'll get people to smile, no matter who they are. So that was fun. We'd had all these people doing that. And that's actually one of my favorite games. The problem is that nobody could afford the maracas to actually own it at home. And
I got it for Christmas, actually. The same day, actually, I first got Shenmue, so I've actually got childhood photos of me holding a Samba de Amigo boxed maraca set and Shenmue.
You were spoiled.
So it was a great Christmas.
Yeah, no, that was really tough because nobody. Yeah, they were really. I mean, I think not only were they expensive, but I think they were also limited. Like I feel like there was a lot of people that couldn't find them and stuff. So I think that game had a lot of challenges to it. I remember. Wait, do you remember Illblade?
Illblade,
Yes.
yeah.
That was a
think
Dreamcast game. That was Dreamcast.
Only
right?
released in America that I'm aware of. Probably Japan as well, actually, but it didn't come over here.
Yeah, so Illblade, I remember this never got out of the prototype stage, but what they wanted to do is they wanted to have a heart rate monitor that came with it. So when you're playing it, it would react to your heart rate. But then the game got, they decided, starting out was going to be this big thing, but then I think the game ended up becoming kind of, I think probably the game just wasn't that great, or they just didn't think it would sell well, so they ended up not doing any promotional support for it. That's the other thing. That's also a good litmus test for a game is when, nowadays it's a little different because budgets are so tight, but back then when people were spending a lot of money on promotion, if they weren't doing any promo for a game, that's usually a sign that they want to bury it or that they don't expect it to do well. And what, I don't know how well, if listeners know that about mock reviews, which is another part of the industry, which is that any major game company, any game you see coming out goes through a mock review cycle. That's where they send it to a reporter who's part of, not a reporter, usually they're former reporters, but their mock reviewers is a whole occupation where they review games, give you a predictive score. Like they go, yeah, this is we can usually it's a group of people, so it's not just one individual. Sometimes like 3 people at an agency, and they'll review a game and go, yeah, we think that you're probably ultimately getting a 2 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10 or what have you, and that sort of dictates what kind of promotional spend the company's going to put behind the game. So there's usually not a lot of surprises with game launches. I mean, publishers can be surprised when something's super successful. But if a game comes out and suddenly getting all these low scores, that's usually not a surprise because they usually have a predictive score known in advance.
Do you know if Shenmue got anything like that?
I have no idea. I don't even know. Did we do a mock review for Shenmue? I don't even remember back then because I know that area was also pretty nascent, or might have been nascent to me. But I don't remember getting any review scores on any of the games I was promoting. I just remember later on in my career always asking about games I was promoting, like, what do you guys expect on this? So that way because the reason why it was important for me to know is because I didn't want to oversell a game if I knew it wasn't a great game, because then as a publicist, all you have is your credibility on the line, and you don't want to send a game and tell a reporter, oh, you're going to love it, this is the greatest game of all time, and then they play it and it's crap, and they won't really respect your perspective. So I mean, it's not that I'm going to tell them something's crap, but I won't. It's not that you underhype something; you just don't overhype it. So I think that's. I mean, the extent of Shenmue. That was pretty much the because we didn't really work on Shenmue 2. Didn't come out here at the time. Did Shenmue ever come out here domestically, or was it only on import?
It would have come out on Xbox in USA.
2003, I think.
Right. So, but it never came out for Dreamcast.
No.
You're right.
No, it was on import. Lots of people imported too, but that was at the end of the Dreamcast life cycle.
Yeah, and so the Dreamcast itself, I mean, there's a lot of people have different perspectives on it, and from my understanding, it's like I knew that we were like $1 million short of the sales we needed to keep it viable. I knew that a couple things kept it from reaching that point. One, this war of attrition with PlayStation, where the big selling point was the modem with the Dreamcast, and PlayStation didn't have one, but Dreamcast kept teasing theirs was coming soon. So there's that whole idea that people held off on buying a Dreamcast long enough to where, even though Sony took many years to actually get to their modem coming out, by the time that happened, Dreamcast had already missed the threshold it needed to be around. The other thing is that it didn't have support from EA, which obviously was a major publisher with a lot of games that would have made the console more appealing to consumers. So I think that was another key variable. I remember we were always being told, like, they were on the fence, like oh, are we going to get EA? You're going to get EA, and then nothing. So that's sort of the extent of knowledge I recall about the death of it.
So, just picking up a point on that. So you mentioned like you were $1 million short of the targets or whatever. But
right.
There's always been like this misconception. I don't know how true it is that Shenmue was all of the eggs in the basket for Sega. Like this game has to be the catalyst for selling the consoles to, get essentially achieve that 1 million that you just said that they were short of. Is it true that like so much weight was put on Shenmue? Would you say?
I actually have no memory. That was
right.
But it sounds right. I mean, that was as you saw when I broke down the game, the amount they were spending on it. It intended to be a killer app, so I would imagine a lot of weight did rely on Shenmue. And like I said, I think a lot of those other games, as cool as they were, they didn't sell that great. And so, but I always say everybody I've met who has a Dreamcast loved it. Like I've never met anybody who says, "Oh, I had a Dreamcast, I hated it." So it really was just people who never got a chance to check it out, which is too bad because it was such a great console. But I don't need to convince you guys of this.
Oh no.
Well, why do you think that was? I mean, you look at the marketing around the Dreamcast, and it felt edgy. Like if you think Sega's marketing for the Mega Drive back in the day, that was really edgy. It was throwing Nintendo under the bus, going, "Yeah, we don't like Nintendo," and really going for them. And they went for Sony a little bit as well. I've seen, again, going through your slides, I see the modem with the PlayStation 2 and the unsolvable maze to the PlayStation modem, which I thought was really absolutely hilarious.
We did a lot of FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, where you try to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the marketing world. And so, like back then, that's when companies were a lot more competitive publicly. Like we weren't afraid to send out postcards that made fun of the fact that they don't have a modem. And so we did a lot of that. I think we did get a lot of media on board with our games. Like I said, that everything was really well reviewed. They just weren't selling well. So that's why I'm saying that I don't think enough people bought. Maybe because the games were so weird, people weren't buying the consoles. Like if they had the traditional EA games, maybe that would have been got more people into, getting it.
The price point was there, though, wasn't it? It was like $199 for the console at launch, so it was like a reasonably priced console.
And wasn't it $97 million launch? What I read.
Yeah, that sounds right.
The revenue for that, which was at the time, as you say, the highest revenue for a console launch ever. So the actual launch itself, take away what happened later on, the launch itself was wildly successful.
Yeah, in fact, actually let me open it up right now. Sales of the Dreamcast will bring in nearly $45 million during the first 24 hours in retail, far surpassing the current record holder, Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, at $28 million.
Wow.
So
that's a massive achievement then, isn't it, really?
Yeah, this was like a press release was sent to like media, broadcast media, like B-roll, video footage. Because we set a record. Well, here's the release: the SEGA Dreamcast, the super console with a built-in 56K modem that will bring the most advanced and realistic video gameplay ever developed to consumers at its retail launch on $9,999. Has set a record with 300,000 pre-orders, shattering the previous record of 100,000 held by Sony PlayStation. The much anticipated launch of Sega Dreamcast will have cash registers in overdrive, expecting to set a new record for the largest 24-hour retail sales period in entertainment history. So this is actually before we even hit the milestone. But it was hit with pre-sales. The time has never been better to cover Sega Dreamcast. The video game industry is now a $7 billion industry, bigger than the film industry.
Wow. Like the thing with the Dreamcast was that obviously the selling point was the modem, like you say, and Sega, I think they got in trouble for it eventually, but they had that tagline that there's up to 6 billion players, because obviously at the time they were talking about everyone in the world could essentially be hooked up to a Dreamcast and play together online, but obviously the phrasing was like sort of suggesting that there will be 6 billion people playing rather than there might, if you know what I mean, like an asterisk.
Kind of like that. I just saw this lawsuit where a woman suing in her work because she did a contest where she could win a free Toyota, and then they gave her a toy Yoda.
That's amazing.
And,
I love that.
So I digress. But so I think that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge on the failure of the Dreamcast. And I'm sure there's people inside who probably Peter Moore, probably put things on the record with why it failed, and he's probably a more legitimate source than myself, because being external, we get information passed along from internal. It doesn't necessarily mean they always tell you everything, or that you know everything.
Right. Did you actually get like any advance notice, like prior to the Dreamcast being discontinued? Would you say, like, was it internally?
Yeah, we would have been told in advance about the sunsetting and about how, because we would definitely have been told that in advance. And, because agencies were known for, with our clients, to keep everything confidential. So it's, we were really good about that. So, we would have known in advance. And because we'd have prepare comms for it, put together a target media list who we're going to share with the news within advance under embargo. That's the other thing, embargoes, which is where you give stories to reporters in advance, and they can't comment on it until a specific date and time. So that's also a very strategic part of the publicist's arsenal to make sure that you have those things set up. And back then, you'd send like NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, so they'd sign off, so that way it would implore them, it would help, it would discourage them from actually leaking it earlier. So,
How do you control that? Because now there's leaks everywhere online. Everything gets leaked. So how did you control that back then?
Well, well, we didn't have to worry about online as much back then.
True.
In the same way we do today. But I mean, here's the thing: that usually when leaks have happened in the game industry, there's usually two main places the leaks come from. It's never from PR. It's usually game stores, because they have to know in advance that they're getting when a game's arriving, so they can plan their shipments and arrivals. So usually it's like, oh, I found out from a GameStop employee, like, oh, they got the games in early and they started selling them before they were supposed to. It usually ties back to GameSpot. I mean, not GameSpot, to GameStop, the game store. Usually, like when I used to hear about leaks, it wasn't even intentional leaks. It was more just bad. They weren't, bad concealing of information. The other thing that used to happen, and could still possible to happen, is that you would send news to overseas. Like, let's say if you're doing a global launch announcement, you've got to let everybody in every country know. And oftentimes it was the time zone. Like somebody would run early with it, but they'd say, oh, because they got the time zone wrong.
Right.
I mean, nowadays, if I put out a press release that's going global, I put, embargo, I put the country and the time zone in each one, so it's very clear,
No excuses.
Right. But sometimes people, like nowadays, like if you send something on embargo, sometimes they write the story and they time it so it's all automated, go out at a certain time. Sometimes the time's been put in wrong. I mean, not all leaks are accidental. I'm sure there are sometimes where somebody has something where they intentionally break embargo. But the reason, to get your question, like the publications, all they have is their credibility with companies. So if Sony sends something to some publication, they break embargo, then Sony's just not going to trust them and send them this news. And if you're in the game space, you want to be getting advance notice of things. It doesn't mean that you write positive or negative things about a company. You just want to at least have access to the information when the other top publications do. And so that's sort of the incentive to not break an embargo. Like I said, but a lot of times it comes from these other sources. There's also nowadays what you have is people who are just technologically savvy to, who can scrape data from companies' sites. They go in and they find holes. So it's not even considered a leak if they can find it through just good deep diving into your, like, oh, I noticed that they owed, this site down. If you go through their code, they have something announced like Shenmue 3 or something, or Shenmue 8.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's just digging through somebody's public information deep enough where it wasn't closed off. Or like, let's say you're launching a new game and you have you create a new website for it, but you haven't made it public yet, and somebody finds the private URL code.
The domain name, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that, this day and age, people are very tech savvy. So it's much more, we're probably seeing a lot more leaks now than before. And
there was someone recently on Twitter that was doing just that. They were going through, I think they broke a lot of Sega information, didn't they, Matt? Actually, they were going
they did.
Sort of in the depths of these URLs. I don't know how they managed to find it, but they were getting screenshots of games that hadn't been announced and stuff like that. So it can be.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it. And then also in this day and age, with so many people being let go, I mean, they, EA just had a big layoff, this week, and so there's a lot of people who, with access to information, who are being let go. Hopefully, the companies that do these layoffs do it humanely, because otherwise, you could end up with a lot of really frustrated people out there who have access to information. So that's also. I mean, think about is, I think a lot of it comes down to just ethics and the character of the people who are impacted. Like I've got a lot of companies where I have access to a lot of information that I would never share just because I just don't think it's ethically correct. For example, I wouldn't share this. Oh, sorry.
Going back to the Dreamcast a little bit now then. So within the company, how was the sort of the general consensus from the people that you're speaking to? Like obviously yourself, your team, were you excited? Was things very positive, or did you have any concerns at all with anything that was happening with the Dreamcast?
Well, first of all, I mean, from the launch period, I mean, we were really excited. We had a lot of, I personally had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with these events, because we were doing events, we did like the Sega Spud Dive was a really fun one. That's where we filled up like the 2,000 pounds of potatoes and had people dive in to spell out the word Sega with plastic letters. Things like that were fun. They weren't fun to actually set up stirring this potatoes, but was a beast. But I mean, we were really optimistic. I mean, I thought that we were at the start of something really exciting. We had great games. That's the thing. The games were amazing. It wasn't like a lot like the opposite would be like the Vita, where I mean, I found there was games that I really like. I love Sound Shapes. I love Gravity Rush. These games were amazing, but I can also see the concept through the eyes of your average consumer. Like, where is the big AAA title that people are going to buy the console for? Like, for example, if I didn't own a PlayStation, I would buy one just to play The Last of Us on it. Yeah. That in Ghost of Tsushima, those games are like console sellers because they're so amazing. And Vita did not have one of those. They just did not have a game that you said, the only way I can play this game is if I own this platform, But the Dreamcast had so many amazing games, but I think that, like I said, I don't think, they had and maybe like going back to your thing about Shenmue, being a big thing they were hoping would change that.
Yeah, it was like the Last of Us for the Dreamcast, Shenmue.
Yeah.
Like, that's what they were hoping.
But one thing Dreamcast also had was great commercials. I love the Choo Choo Rocket commercials, one of my favorites. And Check Ryan Radio. Those were two of my favorite commercials.
So how did, I don't know if you worked on it or not, obviously the Shenmue commercial had the guy with his girlfriend and he shouts Nozomi's name in quite a compromising situation. Was that something you worked on?
I actually don't even remember the Shenmue commercial, so I guess, well, first off, I didn't work on any commercials. Those were actually mostly done, I think, a lot of them out of Japan. Sega of Japan.
Okay.
So there was 3 different studios. There's Sega of America, Sega of Europe, and Sega of Japan. And so we also did things independently. Like, none of the PR stuff we did in America, these promotional items, came from Japan. We created them here. And so that's why they have stuff we don't have. And Sega of Europe had their own stuff as well.
Yeah.
So, but I think the ads, like, we never worked on any ads in our agency. I'm not saying that they weren't ever created in America, but I feel like most of them weren't created. I mean, because when you think about the ones like Check Ryan Radio and Choo Choo Rocket, those are very Japanese.
Did you have much creative freedom then to do whatever you wanted to?
I mean, everything. Well, you're working on people. You have to get, the budget comes from the client. So I couldn't just say, "Hey, surprise! Here's what we're doing." But we'd propose. We had a good client rep, though. The woman who did PR. We had different people over different time who did PR internally, who we would run things by and we'd show them. So yeah, you have to have a cool concept that makes sense and get signed off on. So, but we had the freedom to come up with creative ideas. It wasn't. Sometimes you work at some agencies, or sometimes our work at, like, the company tells you what they're doing. Like, hey, we're doing this. Here's this item. Promote it. As opposed to, hey, I want you to come up with some ideas for us to then work on. So yeah, we had a lot of freedom in that sense, that we were able to propose ideas.
Because I was thinking, like, Sega Japan might have, like, been quite heavily involved, because I know how, like, from what we've heard, they're quite strict back in those days.
Yeah, I don't think we ran a lot of our stuff by Japan.
Okay.
I mean, actually, I don't know if a lot of the stuff we did was so edgy that we would worry about it. But yeah, it was always. I mean, not just dealing with Japan companies in general. It was definitely I wouldn't say a culture shock, but definitely a different culture. I mean, I remember I was on this one call when I was working at Sega with Sega of Japan, and I remember I think it was around Sonic Heroes or some game, but I remember we're trying to have a discussion, but it seemed like half the call people were silent. It was kind of weird. Like, Japan's all staring at them, we're all staring, and then we'd say something, and then maybe it'd be translated, and then it was just really bizarre. It was like the most bizarre meeting I've ever been to. Like, it was this long, hour-long meeting, and I'm like, and I think because I wasn't I wasn't on I was like a fly on the wall type of thing, so I couldn't really step in to sort of speed things along. Like, hey, so wait, talking through. Yeah. But it was just really bizarre. Like the communication styles and everything was so different. But you have to realize we were at, I think Sega Japan controlled everything, so I think we were at their whim in a lot of ways.
I
And
wonder if a lot of that stuff is like more cultural.
Actually, I don't remember if that was the case with Sega. That was the case with PlayStation, where we had to get a lot of approval. When I worked at PlayStation, we had to rely a lot on PlayStation, the home company in Japan, on a lot of things. Like we couldn't, like, oh, we want to do this thing. Well, we got to get approval from Japan. That was a big barrier. Things might have changed over the years, and so keep in mind, I haven't worked PR for like. I stopped working in 2013 doing PlayStation, so it's been 7 plus 5, 12 years since then. So
Time flies.
and obviously much longer than Sega.
I know you've got a story about this, Chase. So
I wish I had a bigger story about. Yeah, so I wish there was a bigger story. So for people not familiar with TV Guide. At the time it came out, I have it framed right in front of me, is that it was the biggest publication in America because there was no real, because it told you what was on television every day of the week. There was no internet site where you'd go and see what's on TV. Oh, here it is. We didn't have mobile phones, we still had pagers back then, but it was like, it was basically the go-to, every family owned it, subscribe to it because that's how you knew what was on television, and you weren't watching things. There was no streaming services; it was only TV. And so they wanted to do one on video games. So they actually did 5 different covers. They had like a Tony Hawk one, Shenmue, and then the other 3 games. I don't remember what they were. And so it just so happens I was working with a reporter at the TV Guide who was compiling this. So, like I said, it's not really. I don't really have a great story. I mean,
it's just great that it exists, right?
Yeah. So it also helps. It shows the media were buying into Shenmue. So it's a proof of concept of that. When you get TV, this reporter there to be on board with making it one of the covers means he saw that this is one of the big games of the time. And so, yeah, I wish there was like some story beyond just basic PR pitching. And to be even more honest, he might have come to the conclusion on his own without any pitching, meaning that, you send a game, somebody reviews, but he might check out the game and just be reading what everybody else is saying. It could be when you see a lot of other publications raving about a game, that can also, okay, this is part of the public, this is part of the gaming, the national conversation around gaming. Shenmue is one of those titles, so I'm going to use it to put on the cover. So I wish I could take more credit or have a fun story to tell, but I think it's just being the right place, right time, with the right reporter.
Like I say, it's awesome that it exists, though.
Yeah. Well, but what isn't awesome is the fact that publications don't exist. Really, I mean, so much of the print publications have gone away because, first off, everybody, like newspapers, things like. Nobody wants to read day-old news. Everybody wants breaking news. You can't do that with print. And so that's all just expensive. And today's youth, they consume all their entertainment online. So, so I missed the TV Guide, but at the time, it was so exciting to be the biggest publication in America, getting on the cover. That was really exciting.
So, just a couple more questions on like the Shenmue side of things, actually. So, obviously. Not to, again, like we were saying, like putting all of the eggs in the basket for Shenmue, but in hindsight, is there anything that you like personally would have wished for like marketing, PR wise for Shenmue? If you could go back in time and do anything differently to sort of, I don't know, just make it spread wider than it did do.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, what year did it come out? 2000.
Well, it actually came out in '99 in Japan, the tail end of '99, and then
right. But I would have been working on it in like 2000, so
2000,
we're talking about. So that's like 25 years ago. Unfortunately, my memory of that time, is not.
Yeah.
I don't have as clear in terms of I felt at the time we were doing great PR for it, so we got great coverage for it. Yeah, like I said, I think that's why I think a lot of it came down to other things that kept people from buying a console. and like I said, the lack of EA support, the promise of a modem coming from PlayStation. I think those were really big deals, And,
So not so much Shenmue specifically.
Yeah.
It was like all the other factors.
The truth is, I have no idea if at the time Shenmue was the one that could make or break the console. But I think that was the biggest game that we were releasing at the time. So I don't think it's a stretch to think that when you put out your biggest game, if it's not selling well, because that's what's going to sell the console, then yeah, it could be the eggs in a basket type thing.
Were you involved in this at all? So this is a Blockbuster exclusive. So this was only in America. This version.
No, I wasn't.
No.
Yeah, so that's something they would have done with the marketing, the sales team, the retail team. So yeah, so I would put that in. Even though sometimes PR falls under marketing, there's times when marketing and PR are two separate entities. When you're talking about swag, like the marketing are the people who sell to stores and get people retail, and PR deals with reporters. And so I never really worked on that. I never worked on the marketing to stores, other than if I saw marketing people with cool swag, I'd hit them up so I can have it for myself.
Don't blame me.
It's like these things, like the plastic dolls and things that were done. We didn't have any. Like I probably swiped these from when I was visiting Japan. Like those and the sketchbooks and the other things. Those, we didn't release those in America. We pretty much just send out the game, the press release, and trading cards. And
obviously a lot of games went on tour. What was the feedback from Shenmue when that went on tour? Was it positive? What did people think of it?
Well, that's the thing. I'm trying to think. I wonder. I don't remember taking Shenmue on the road, so I wonder if somebody else on our team did, or if we did it as part of another event. Because sometimes if the game was coming out, say like at E3 or during some other event, sometimes that would take the place of doing if the media are already at a convention. Removed. Wait, what month did it launch? I don't have the
November 2000. It launched.
Okay, so that one E3. Yeah, I'm trying to remember taking Shenmue on tour. I don't actually, unfortunately. Like I said, it might have been somebody else on our team, or we just might not have done a media tour for it. It could have been like at our gamers event where we did like some of the other games we did. Multiple games, but unfortunately, I don't recall doing that for Shenmue.
What were your personal thoughts and feelings about Shenmue? Did you think it was a good game at the time? Like exciting?
Oh, I thought. Yeah. We all thought. Like all those bullet points I read earlier, like the sound changes based where you're heading. I thought the game was amazing what it was setting out to do. For me. First off, when you do PR for games, you don't actually ever have time to play the games that you're promoting, at least not to completion. I don't actually remember as a publicist, I was obsessing over all of its cinematic-like qualities. I think the games that I personally was more excited about, like Jekyll and Radio, is a game I played to completion. So I think that was, at the time, more in my wheelhouse. But it wasn't also those games where you have to press A, B, what's it called, the text, the type of fighting style you would have at times.
The QuickTime events.
QuickTime. Like I wasn't into QuickTime. I was more into, my thing was more like the Resident Evil or Tomb Raider. Those were my kind of adventure games. So as far as a player, it wasn't something that I was like I still never completed Shenmue. I played about half of it. But I loved what, from a PR position, it was amazing to pitch, and people loved it. My personal thing, like I said, every gamer has the types of games that they like to play or they do good at. But I think as a whole, we were all excited to be promoting it. It was like it felt like it was a really cool thing to have in our arsenal, and that we knew people would be excited about it. Like I thought it was very groundbreaking at the time. And I know they rebooted, like they brought it back. Wait, Shenmue 3. So is that the one that came out recently, or?
Yeah, the Kickstarter in 2015 at E3, and then it released in 2019.
How is it? I've been thinking of going to check that out.
I mean, being honest and brutally honest, I think we give it a solid 7 out of 10. It does a lot of things very well. They've made some odd decisions with it as well. But I'd recommend any Shenmue fan to go and play it. And it is a miracle that game exists, because this was a franchise that sort of got mothballed. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. And the fact the game exists itself is a miracle. And given the scope of the project, considering when you were doing PR for Shenmue, it was the most expensive video game of all time.
Yeah.
So it had this massive budget. It was hugely groundbreaking. But then to go to Shenmue 3, which was a kickstarted project, they got a publisher on board later. It was a very different development cycle for it. And with the greatest respect to Shenmue 3, it shows in some aspects of the game. I enjoyed it, had a good time with it. James had a good time with it.
Definitely.
But there were elements of that game that didn't go down particularly well. But if we get a Shenmue 4, and that's the hope, we get a Shenmue 4.
I mean, I think this is the other problem with nostalgia, is that, like, I love the first couple Tomb Raider games, and then they had like a run of about 8 mediocre games, and they came back strong. Like the last 4 new games, 3 or 4 were amazing. But I remember, like, the first 2 games were some of my all-time favorite games, and then when they re-released them recently, I said, "Oh, I can't wait to replay them." I'm like, I mean, first off, it's the controls that ruin those games. Like, I couldn't jump on certain laces. Like I spent like the first 5 minutes, couldn't even get my character centered and everything, and so it's like, I'm like, that's why they need to be remade, not remastered. But that's the thing, though. It's like I'm playing this, I can't believe I thought these games were so amazing, because they're so frustrating now. And that's the thing. It's like, I think there's a lot of nostalgia. Like, I think if Shenmue's brought back, they should have Naughty Dog should do it. That would be an interesting, bring that level of realism.
That'd be mad.
I mean, I remember when Grand Theft Auto came out. I mean, I think they had like forklifts and stuff. I'm like, isn't this game just Shenmue gangster style, or like a?
Nice
because Grand Theft Auto, it was also about realism in a lot of different ways, and I thought it was an extension of Shenmue. I thought that its touch was there.
Influenced by Shenmue.
Yeah, but actually, I would really love to see a modern day studio, bring Shenmue back. Because I think it does have so much amazing stuff in it. But like I said, a lot of the things they did was that, they sunk so much money into it that I think you have to if you really want to have it at the same level, I think you definitely help to have like a AAA company behind it.
Yeah, we do agree. I mean, Sega were on the cusp of remaking it at one point, and then they just sort of decided just to port it instead. So the PS4, Xbox, those copies of the game is just like essentially a remaster of 1 and 2. I don't know how familiar you are with Shenmue 2, Chase, but like if you want your action-based sort of gameplay, Shenmue 2 is where it's at, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah,
no, I never got a chance to play it. I always wanted a copy back in the day. No, I mean, I don't want to miss. I liked Shenmue, but it wasn't one of the genre of games that I obsess over. Like at the time when I had so many games to play or work on, it just. But that has no bearing on my appreciation of what it was doing for gaming at the time. Like I just thought it was such a landmark game. And like when I talk about comparing it to cinema, at that time I was a true believer in that, like what it was doing and achieving, and that's why I think it's such a landmark game.
Good stuff, yeah. Right, Chase, I mean, we could probably ask you a million more questions about the Dreamcast and stuff, but obviously we don't want to take up too much more of your time. We can tell that you've got a fondness for that era of your profession. Is that fair to say? Like you look back fondly on the Dreamcast era?
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, the games industry as a whole, this is when, like I said, it was the salad days. It's when they were throwing so much money into it so you could come up with creative ideas for events, for swag, conventions. There's no... You could fly people in for events. You could fly to people. You could do all these things. And nowadays, there's none of that. Like it seems like every month we're hearing about layoffs at studios, and it's just, and people have found ways to do things remotely, and it's just the whole industry, the whole world has changed, shifted, but definitely the games industry industry. I mean, I'm really saddened today. Even the media today, Polygon they axed a huge chunk of Polygon staff in the U.S. And like people have been there for years. Like it was really sad. It's like we're seeing, and this happens. I keep seeing I have my media list of all the reporters I work with, and it seems like once a week I'm removing a name from it because, especially as AI gets more prolific, people are going to think, well, I mean, look at it this way. For example, the way web gaming sites, the biggest thing that people go to web gaming sites for are game guides. That's like the number one thing they go to read, like a walkthrough of this game or what have you. What's happening now is AI is taking those walkthroughs and putting it on the front page of search engines. So if you're somebody who wants a game guide, you might just go into your ChatGPT or what have you and just go through it there without ever even going to the site. So that's true, so if that's the main driver of traffic and it's being usurped by AI, it doesn't paint a good future for the press, for game sites. And so it makes me really sad. And also, the way you monetize your site through two ways, through advertising and often through subscriptions. And because people have grown acclimated to getting all their news or information for free, people don't want to deal with, if a site has a paywall, they'll just Google and find that information somewhere else. And so there's not a lot of the revenue that these publications need to keep these reporters on board just isn't coming. But that's a whole other podcast on the state of the press.
I've not actually thought about that, to be honest. Like you say, like it's stopping web traffic really in a sense, because like you say, you Google now and the top thing that you see is this AI generated answer to what you Googled, rather than the websites that actually had that detail that it's almost sort of stolen.
You have to be careful with that though, because it often gets it wrong, or the summaries in there aren't quite what they seem. So you read it and go, well, I'll check the website it's linked that from, because I'm not quite sure. And quite often it misses out key nuances or things. I mean, AI is prevalent at the moment. It's a massive talking point. There's a lot of controversy around AI, but it's not going to go away. And it's just what it is. It's how we better utilize it to support what we do, I guess.
Well, the important thing is that, like you brought up a very important thing about AI, which is that people have to be aware that it's not always accurate. And if you're not, then, you might be a victim of misinformation. For example, there's a mobile game I play called Sound Maps. It's Pokemon Go for music. Really fun, actually. You go around and collect different genres of music, and then you build playlists. They have like a mini quest, which is like a guessing game, and you have to guess an artist, and then it has like categories, like you have to say, Beyonce, and then it'll tell you if you got the right genre, the right country, whether it's a soloist or a group. It's these things in the right year. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I'll say, okay, top solo artist from the UK in 2015, and AI continually gives me the wrong information, like who debuted that year, and I keep, it's made it very hard for me to cheat at this game because they keep giving me wrong information. Unless I actually artists they give me, then unless I go to a second stop and then drill down on that artist, like they go, if it's Beyonce, then I have to go to Beyonce's wiki to make sure, I ain't got time for that.
Well, it's good actually speaking to you specifically, Chase, because this is like factual, direct from the horse's mouth. There's no AI generated Chase out there.
This is a deep fake. This is Chase GPT.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, actually, AI is not dumb enough to write the things that I do. On LinkedIn,
you have had some really fascinating stories, and it's been awesome actually just speaking to you, because you're someone that's like been quite instrumental in shaping like our childhood, because the Dreamcast came out when I was 13, somewhere like that. So some of these PR stunts, promotional items and stuff like that I've seen in magazines throughout the years and stuff like that. So it's really cool to speak to someone that's actually part of that, and like I say, that like sort of shaped my childhood. And one of the reasons I'm sat here now talking to you, sort of thing, which is really awesome.
Very cool. Yeah. Oh, I did remember one thing I don't think I talked about on another podcast, on another interview. I don't think I brought up. But did I ever talk about the tchotchke we did for House of the Dead? We did, for House of the Dead, we did a zombie makeup kit for House of the Dead.
No way.
So we mailed that out. So it had like face paint and stuff. And I remember that was a fun tchotchke. For Echo the Dolphin, we did little treasure chests that said like actually just says Sega on them. So I wish I had branded them with Dreamcast. We sent out little wooden treasure chests. For Mach and X, we sent out little samurai swords with a little card attached. Those ones that are about this big. Just some other tchotchke. And the Seaman campaign was also really cool because they created that fake documentary video. They also have a book about Seaman, like this scientific little booklet they printed out, published, like it's got like a spine and everything. And so they went really hard sell on trying to make it seem like Seaman was a real thing. And
You just made me think of something actually with when you're on about the Echo crate just having Sega on it.
Yeah.
There was a thing like I've read this and obviously it's quite obvious, but a lot of the branding around the Dreamcast was just the Dreamcast. Like they sort of dropped the Sega logo from marketing for the Dreamcast, didn't they, Matt? If you know what I mean.
Yeah, they did.
It's sort of like whether it was because of the Sega Saturn or whatever, they were trying to make people think it was. I don't know why they would want people to think it's not a Sega console, but they wanted to sort of detach people away from Sega being like the sort of negative thing, and Dreamcast is this brand new thing. I don't know if that's anything that you're aware of, Chase.
Well, I'm not quite sure what the question is. Like, were we trying to separate the Dreamcast from the Sega logo?
Yeah, kind of. It's
certainly over here.
on the branding, right?
They didn't play on Sega. They literally said Dreamcast. That was
Yeah, but didn't the video still end with the Sega scream, or did they tune it out for the Dreamcast commercials? I mean, I know that the Dreamcast itself did the "It's listening." I think was that the catchphrase?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, and it does say that Leonard Nimoy was the narrator for
Seaman, right?
For Seaman, yeah. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't remember any sort of guidance on logoing of like, oh, don't say Sega, just say Dreamcast or anything like along those lines.
Okay.
I always felt like Sega was pretty much part attached to everything Dreamcast. Right? I mean, because it still was like the Sega company was still. I mean, that was I think they definitely wanted a lot of visibility for Sega, so I don't think they would have tried to separate it. It's a product, so it's like it wouldn't make sense. It wasn't like its own entity.
Anything with the Dreamcast swirl? Because I know there was like another thing that the Japanese one's like orange, and the American one's slightly redder, and then the European one's blue, obviously.
Nope, I have no idea why they were different, other than maybe just to define territories. I have no idea on that, but it's cool because that's how I know where my swag is from. Like, oh, these are blue. This must be from Sega of Europe. Yeah, and definitely I have a lot of really weird Sega stuff. I've done recently. I did that thing at Gamer Realm where I held up a bunch of weird swag.
Could we link those videos, by the way? Is that something? Because I know it was unlisted.
Oh, I can. You can link the unlisted video. That's fine.
Okay, brilliant.
I haven't watched it, so I don't know how I come across it. But just looking
really
at my
enjoyed
video
it.
here, I feel like it's kind of shadow on one side here, so I'm sorry it's not better lit here.
Oh, it's all right.
No, it's better than my lighting.
It's better than mine as well.
There you go. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed in terms of the games, things we might have done that were interesting. I'm sure as soon as I get off this call, something will come up.
Well, yeah, same here with questions. Yeah. We should have asked Chase that, but it's one of those things. Like with an interview, I mean, maybe we can get you back on and talk a little bit more if there's anything else that pops to mind. But I think you've done a great job of summarising a lot of like what was going on at the time within the company there, and obviously from your side of things, marketing and public relations and getting the word out on these big titles to the press and media is, something that we can look back on fondly, I think, ourselves.
It's cool. It was. I think the Dreamcast definitely holds a special time in my life. Like being able to promote it, I just love the games. Just everything we were putting out, Typing of the Dead, D2 even. I just thought we were putting out so much creative stuff, and people were loving it. Sega Bass Fishing. For that, we sent out tackle boxes with like gummy worms inside.
That's cool.
And we even had at E3. We actually had we had an actual taxi, like a convertible car skinned like a taxi with the cast brought together. Like we had like an actual taxi with people dressed up as the characters. But that might be for high rollers, so it might have exceeded beyond the Dreamcast. That's the other thing is like some of these games, like because I did a lot around for Jet Set Radio Future, so sometimes my mind blurs. Like, what was Jet Grind, Jet Set? Well, actually, we never did Jet Set.
Spillover.
Oh wait, no, we did. Jet Grind was the original in Japan, so we did Jet Set Radio in America and Jet Set Radio Future. So, did I get that
Great games.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Slightly, I think it was Jet Set Radio in Europe and Japan.
And we did Jet Grind Radio, but then we did Jet Set Radio Future.
That's right, yeah.
So I guess we went back to the original, to the sequel, which was a great game too.
I love the sequel.
We got to work with the Beastie Boys side project for that, for the soundtrack of Jet Set Radio Future, but they went by a different name.
Can't think off the top of my head, but yeah, I know. Was it the something Brothers?
Something Brothers.
Yeah.
I had the exact same thing in my head. It's like somebody Brothers. Yeah. Well, you guys are obviously. I just love looking at the background of all the stuff you guys did. It's funny because I have a poster size blow up of the TV guide cover that I just gave to somebody locally, to a guy who's another Dreamcast fanboy.
There's loads of us, isn't there?
Yeah, there's loads of us kicking around.
With definitely very passionate.
Yeah, I'm glad to see it. It's a small, passionate breed.
Okay, brilliant. Got anything else you want to ask, Matt, before we bring it to a close?
I'll just say thank you for your time and giving us such an insight into what was, I think, one of the most exciting times in gaming. I mean, the Dreamcast, it was that, I don't know, it just went against the grain for everything, but that's why it was so revered, so loved, and actually why it has such an active community now. People still play it now, still people are making games for it now. It's people are bringing GTA 3 has just been put on Dreamcast. All these years later, there's such an active community around that console, and I think that spans from, I think, a lot of the groundwork that was done around marketing it and making it just such an exciting console to want to own. And like you say, with the launch lineup it had, I'd argue it's one of the strongest launch lineups ever. So thank you so much for your insight into all of that.
Yeah, actually, now you just reminded me what I remember when I played Grand Theft Auto. The reason why I thought of it as Shenmue, not because of the forklifts in it, but also when you first walk into like your apartment in Grand Theft Auto, you can put on your outfits and stuff. I remember, I'm like, wait, this is just like Shenmue. I was like thinking like, people don't realize how much GTA has taken from Shenmue.
It is true. Yeah,
definitely did. It absolutely did.
Speaking about that recently, weren't we, Matt, about the influence of Shenmue? Because I don't know if you saw, Chase, but Shenmue won a BAFTA for being the most influential video game of all time. So it's definitely got its claws in other gaming properties,
other fields,
yeah, for sure. But yeah, so we'll wrap up there, Chase. So obviously, if there's anywhere that people can go to follow you, find out what you're up to these days, you're welcome to share if you use social media or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think just if people want to reach, I'm at Chase, just Chase, 3 words, the Chase, then the word just, and then the
Chase,
word Chase.
just Chase.
On Twitter, as you follow me. That's the best place to find me is there. I mean, I don't tweet as much as I used to, just because I'm not a huge fan of where Twitter's at right now. But that's the easiest place to find me. I'm not leaving the platform, so I can always do DMs there as well.
And you're currently with Stream Elements, right?
Stream Elements, correct.
Yeah, okay.
So, and hopefully, people use our products are streaming Dreamcast games. So
I'm sure they are, yeah. Well, like Matt
That's
said, we are so.
Well, I appreciate you guys setting this up. I know it's late over there, and also, I appreciate you guys keeping the flame alive for Dreamcast. That's amazing. So I appreciate it. You taking time to speak to me about it.
Awesome.
And
Appreciate you.
yeah, because I also just having this, having my thoughts recorded is also great because it kind of as immortalized a lot of things that I worked on. So it's always great for me to have these things because as I get older and I've parted ways with a lot of my Dreamcast swag recently that's been in storage with other collectors and people who are passionate about it, like a guy I know who runs like a Dreamcast museum here. Because I realized that if I can't display it and it's just in boxes and storage, even if I love this stuff, I'm like, I'd rather be someplace with people who can appreciate it. Because I said, if I die, my kids are just going to open these things and go, "Ooh, who would care about a Sega Dreamcast press kit garbage?" And so it's sort of like, yeah. So that's why, like, when you asked for like the postcard for Shenmue, I didn't have a problem just sending it to you guys because I know you'll actually appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Like one of my dreams is to open a Shenmue museum, which is like very, very niche. But that would like literally, it'll go on display and hopefully it can be shared.
Yeah. Well, you guys already had all the Shenmue swag that I did, so I couldn't hook you up with it.
That's true.
Cool.
But yeah,
Right.
no, it's great. It is really great.
Loved it. Thoroughly enjoyed it tonight.
All right. Well, if you have any follow-up questions or things, you just keep DMing, message me, and I'll hook you up with whatever you want.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really appreciate that then, Chase. So, yeah, we'll leave it there then, guys. So thanks very much for listening or watching if you're watching the YouTube version. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Great insight into the Dreamcast. Thank you very much again, Chase.
Are you guys going to TwitchCon in Europe by any chance in Rotterdam?
I hadn't had plans to.
Not, because I've got a little one on the way. I don't think I'll be going anywhere for a while.
Okay.
Whereabouts is it
I go
based?
there in Rotterdam.
Rotterdam, sorry, yeah. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. Anyways, because we'll have a booth there, so I'll be out for that. But
well, there you go, guys.
Amazing.
If anyone's there and you want to meet up with Chase and share some Dreamcast stories or chat Shenmue.
Oh yeah. I actually love talking about Dreamcast, so it's I'm running out of fresh stories to tell unless actually I should go through a bunch of my old archival documents and see if they spark memories of things that I forgot about.
If they do, you can come back on and immortalize those ones as well.
Please do.
Yeah.
There you go.
Awesome.
All right. Well, you guys have a good evening, and I will talk to you later.
Brilliant.
Take it easy. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Chase. All the best, mate. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Cheers.
Ah, look at the time.